So, Sonic X Shadow Generations came out. Well, technically it's not out unless you bought the Digital Deluxe Edition, which gave you access to the game a few days early. Giving you early access for buying a premium edition of a game is apparently the trend now. DBZ Sparking Zero did it, Starfield did it, and now this game too. I wish you got early access from pre-ordering the base edition. Instead, I had to pay $10 extra for a Digital Deluxe Edition I didn't really want. The Digital Deluxe Edition has stuff like extra music, skill points for upgrading your character, and other goodies, but I think the two most interesting additions are the Terrio skin and the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie pack. Terrios, for those who are unaware, is an early design for Shadow the Hedgehog that didn't make the final cut. This skin was definitely included for the die-hard Sonic fans, cause I'd be surprised if anyone with a life actually knows who Terrios is. But hey, I paid for the skin, so I guess I'm the biggest nerd here. The Sonic 3 movie pack is actually DLC that's coming later in mid-December, and that will include voice lines from Keanu Reeves, who's playing Shadow in the new movie, as well as a new skin based on Shadow's appearance in the new Sonic 3 movie. And apparently, a new level for the game based on Tokyo. I'm not too excited for the skin or the voice lines, but I am looking forward to the new stage. All in all, it is neat that we have some crossover between the movie stuff and the game content. For pre-ordering any version of the game, you also get one other thing, and that's the Sonic Adventure Legacy skin. A skin for modern Sonic based on Sonic's low-poly design from the Dreamcast version of Sonic Adventure. I'm a sucker for low-poly characters and super detailed environments. I think the contrast between the styles is hilarious, so I can dig this. Shadow got the Terrio skin, Modern Sonic got the Sonic Adventure skin, and Sega also went and made a DLC skin for Classic Sonic based on Sonic's appearance from Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn. Unfortunately, this doesn't come with the Digital Deluxe Edition, and I mean, come on, you couldn't throw this in there too. It's only $1.49. You're really penny pinching here, Sega. You guys remember a decade ago when on-disc DLC was this really big controversial thing? Now it's just the norm to have DLC packed up and ready to go when a game launches. I'll never be a fan of Day 1 DLC, but alas, enough boomer talk. Let's get into the game itself. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you don't care to hear about the Sonic portion of Sonic X Shadow Generations because it's a remaster of a 13-year-old game you've already played. Though there are some noteworthy new changes, like the addition of the drop dash and quite a bit of new dialogue and characterization to make the characters more in line with how they act in the more recent Sonic games. Like for example, Sonic and Tails now remember Green Hill and Chemical Plant, and Amy's humongous crush on Sonic is toned down. All in all though, the game is still great. Sonic Generations is still the same high-speed action platformer that you know and love. I think the original 2011 release still sounds, looks, and plays great, though the cutscenes do look a bit low quality compared to the rest of the game. Besides that though, the original release is awesome, which is why I found it strange that they decided to do a remaster of it. If they had just released a version with updated textures, better performance, and improved lighting, I probably wouldn't have paid too much attention to this remaster. And I'm sure Sega read my mind, so as a bonus, they included a brand new campaign called Shadow Generations, hence the title, Sonic X Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations is a story set during the same time as Sonic Generations. While the two Sonics are dealing with the Time Eater, Shadow is dealing with a returning Black Doom, who somehow survived the events of Shadow the Hedgehog. Apparently he went into hiding or something and he slowly rebuilt himself on the Space Colony arc. Now Black Doom is using the Time Eater's power to speed up the process of rebuilding his army, so it's up to Shadow to stop him. I think Shadow Generations did a decent job of integrating this story with the story of Sonic Generations. Sonic showing up out of nowhere and fighting Shadow was a bit random, but there really aren't too many ways you can handle that since in the original Generations, that is kinda how the boss fight with Shadow goes. You just walk up to Shadow and start the battle. I really did like the callback to the fake emerald from Sonic Adventure 2. Shadow lets Sonic get the fake emerald when Sonic beats him in the fight, so Shadow can continue to use the real emerald during his storyline. My only complaint is I wish we actually got to fight Sonic here. Their whole fight is shown in a cutscene. It would have been cool to play the boss fight from Shadow's perspective. It's not too often we get to fight Sonic as a boss in a Sonic game, so that would have been really awesome. Alas, a missed opportunity. At the very least, Shadow Generation shows that Shadow was holding back during his fight with Sonic as he didn't want to use his Doom powers because it would make the fight unfair or something. But anyway, this confirms that Shadow is better than Sonic. Like Sonic Generations, Shadow Generations has you go through multiple levels throughout Sonic's history, but this time there's more of a focus on zones that have a connection to Shadow, like the Space Colony arc where Shadow was born, and Radical Highway, Shadow's first ever playable level, which I guess makes Radical Highway kind of like Shadow's equivalent of Green Hill Zone. There are 6 zones in the game: Space Colony Arc from Sonic Adventure 2, Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes, Kingdom Valley from Sonic 06, Sunset Heights from Sonic Forces, Chaos Island from Sonic Frontiers, and Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2. I gotta say, I am a little disappointed in the stage selection. First off, why is Chaos Island a stage in this game? Shadow wasn't even in Sonic Frontiers. I guess they probably did it because they just wanted to include a stage from a recent mainline Sonic game. Second, and most egregiously, there's not one single stage from Shadow the Hedgehog, you know, the 2005 game. Side note, from now on, can we as a community agree to call this game Shadow 05? Kind of like the 2006 game Sonic the Hedgehog is called Sonic 06 by fans. It's just way easier than having to clarify when I'm talking about Shadow the Hedgehog and when I'm talking about Shadow the Hedgehog, you know? But anyways, how do you not have a dedicated Shadow 05 stage in a game that's all about going through Shadow's history? I know Black Doom is the main antagonist of this campaign, so technically the whole thing is a Shadow 05 reference, but honestly, that makes it even more jarring that there isn't at least one stage that originated from that game. I think one of the Black Comet stages would have been perfect. Other than that, the stages make sense for the most part. Every other stage is from a game that Shadow was in. For years, we've been beaten over the head again and again by Green Hill and Chemical Plant, so it's really nice to get stages from the newer Sonic games. It's funny, I say newer, but Sonic Heroes is older now than Sonic 1 was when the original generations came out. Think about that. Sonic has a whole catalog of other games to take stages from. There's tons of kids who grew up during the adventure era and the quote-unquote dark ages of Sonic that would probably love to see their favorite childhood stages come back. Sega is sitting on a goldmine of nostalgia that they're only really just now capitalizing off of. To access these new stages, you go through a hub world, just like in Sonic Generations, but the hub world is now in 3D, which makes it feel a lot more like the open world gameplay style of Sonic Frontiers. I thought this was a good way to keep the essence of the original Generations, while still keeping the game in line with the direction of the current era of Sonic. Unfortunately, just like in the original Generations, in order to get to the boss levels, you have to get keys by doing these challenge mission levels, where they make you complete certain objectives, like getting to the end of the stage with only one ring, or defeating a certain amount of enemies, or blah 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 busy work. It's just there to pad out the game's runtime. The Shadow campaign is pretty short. If you're just going through these stages and not doing any exploring in the hub world, you can probably get it done in about 2 hours. The hub world does have a few things for you to do in it. You can find these boxes that are filled with stuff like music and artwork to look at. There are also these mini challenges that you can do. They're simple stuff like collecting a certain number of rings before time runs out, and they also give you little goodies. The coolest collectibles are probably these pages of Gerald's journal. Also, Orbot and Cubot are here. Definitely not the characters I was expecting to see in this game, and they're trying to build a rocket ship. You have to look for these little bolts scattered around the hub world to help rebuild the rocket. There are other NPCs you can talk to in the hub world too, most of which being characters that didn't show up in the original Generations, like Omega and Big. Considering we got characters from Shadow's past like Gerald and Maria, it is a bit unfortunate that we didn't get to see the Gun Commander. The hub world in Shadow Generations is actually structured somewhat like a Metroidvania game, where sections of it are inaccessible to you until you get access to upgrades that allow you to traverse those areas. These upgrades are called Doom Powers, and these powers let you do things like ride on water and teleport by knocking enemies around. When I first saw the Doom Powers in the trailers, I was skeptical. They seemed like a gimmick, and I was right. A lot of the Doom Powers are mostly context-sensitive abilities that you can only use when the game tells you when to use them. After finishing the game, I didn't hate the Doom Powers. I just didn't really care too much for them once I found out how limited a lot of them are. The Doom Wings are really cool though. They're kind of like Shadow's equivalent of Supersonic in this game, since they make Shadow basically invincible and you can activate them by getting 50 rings. Like the other Doom Powers, there are moments when it's very clear you're meant to use them, but you can also use the Doom Wings in other places which can allow you to skip over big portions of the level, like Tails from Sonic Adventure 1. Speaking of the levels, I guess it's time I properly talked about those since they are the meat and potatoes of the gameplay. Each of the 6 zones in this game has 2 acts, and after each major portion of the game, there's a boss fight. The first act is a 3D level, while the second act is a 2D level, an inverse of the setup of the original Generations, where classic Sonic's 2D gameplay was Act 1, and modern Sonic's 3D gameplay with a 2D mix was in Act 2. Like modern Sonic, Shadow can boost and use the homing attack. However, his version of the homing attack is a bit different. Instead of dashing at his opponents like Sonic does, Shadow teleports, which is a million times cooler. His teleportation isn't just an aesthetic thing either. You can actually use his homing attack teleport to go through walls that would have been impossible to get past otherwise. This is honestly a really neat feature. Shadow has another really nifty power, his signature ability, Chaos Control, allowing him to stop time for a few seconds. Chaos Control is really useful. You can use it to freeze enemies in place, allowing you to easily dispatch them. You can stop stage hazards, allowing you to easily pass by them, and stopping time even causes the game's in-game timer to stop, which is pretty handy for getting S ranks in the challenge missions. Shadow is really fun to play as, and it helps that the level design in the game is dope. In terms of boost formula gameplay, Sonic Forces and Sonic Frontiers' cyberspace levels felt like a step backwards. Shadow Generations, on the other hand, feels like the next step in the boost gameplay that we've been waiting for since the original Generations came out over a decade ago. The level design is just as good as Generations. The levels are a good length, not too long and not too short. There's plenty of alternate routes for you to take, the pacing of the levels is quick, and Shadow's new abilities offer some extra variety to the levels. I think my personal favorite stage is probably Kingdom Valley Act 1. The level gives you quite a bit of freedom to move around, which makes it really fun to find shortcuts with the Doom Wings. The boss levels aren't as good as the regular stages. I found them to be a bit too easy, but they don't overstay their welcome, so I'd say they're fine enough. The game has 4 bosses, the Bio Lizard from Sonic Adventure 2, Metal Sonic from Sonic Heroes, Mephiles from Sonic 06, and Black Doom from Shadow 05. The boss fights do feel fairly unique from one another, so that's a good thing. The highlights of the boss levels are the insane cinematic moments. Sonic Team definitely took some lessons from Sonic Frontiers, because the cutscenes in this game are crazy hype. I had a big smile on my face from just seeing Shadow be cool. Visually, the game is really good. I already mentioned the hype moments, but the game just looks nice all around. My favorite parts were the moments when Black Doom would appear and distort reality to make everything look super trippy and weird. These segments were some of the most visually striking parts of the game. I do think that Gerald's model looks a bit weird. Maybe it's because I'm not used to seeing him be so thin, but also just his face looks kinda goofy. I think Maria's model fits fairly well though. 3D human characters have almost always been a rough spot for Sonic. I think the series peaked with the humans in Sonic Unleashed. However, I think Maria's model finds a good balance between being somewhat realistically proportioned and still being stylized and expressive. While we're talking about the game from a style standpoint, I would talk about the music, but it's a Sonic game. You know it's gonna have bangers. Like with the original Generations, it was cool to get remixes of classic Sonic songs from the older stages. I think my personal favorite tracks from Shadow Generations are probably Radical Highway Act 1 and the Supporting Me remix from the Bio Lizard boss fight. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover about this game. Shadow Generations is awesome. It's right up there with the original Sonic Generations. Luckily, both games are included in this little mini collection. Shadow Generations is short, but it's a quality experience for that short amount of time. Plus, I get an enhanced version of Sonic Generations as a bonus, so I think my purchase was well worth it. Shadow Generations and the whole Sonic X Shadow Generations package as a whole is truly peak 3D Sonic. If you enjoy Sonic content, I have a whole playlist of other Sonic videos for you to watch. That's all I've got to talk about for today though, so thanks for watching y'all, and have a great rest of your day.